homogeneous. Now you know that the story of Babel follows immediately on the flood. It comes right after the rainbow comes and the covenant with Noah and Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and that multiplication that comes after the waters dry and those tribes, and they're all together. So everybody's the same. It's very homogeneous, and that's what we're told. They're all the same. They all speak the same language. Words are all the same depending on which translation you read. Primitive times, no doubt. But they're afraid. Isn't that interesting? They're afraid. They're scared. They're afraid. They huddle together. And they're moving east until they find this valley of Shinar. And they want to settle there. And they decide to build this city so that they will be safe. And that part was fine with God. That part was just fine with God. God doesn't mind progress. God has no trouble at all with progress. And they even plan how they're going to do it. They must have had a committee, right? All good things come from committees. They decide they take stones, probably like the ones you're holding, and I don't know, some of you are engineers or know about these things. I don't understand why burning a stone, can anybody explain that to me? Why does burning the stone? I don't get that. No, none of you either? I don't get it. But anyway, they decide to burn the stone, and that turns it into brick. I don't get it. But anyway, so they do that, and they get mortar, and now they've got that. And God doesn't mind that either, because God doesn't mind technology. That's okay. That's all okay. But then their plan turns into making a name for themselves. They decide, now remember, don't forget that this is all out of fear. That's all out of the bottom, at the bottom of all of this. They're afraid. This is why they're doing it. You know, it's not just that they're bored or something. They want to stick together because they're afraid. So they make a name for themselves. That's what they want to do, so that they won't be scattered. Now they're on shaky ground with making a name for themselves, because God is the one who makes names. God is either the one who makes the names for things, or God can delegate making the names. Right? Adam, you get to name things. But you don't just go around naming yourself. No. Now you're above your pay grade, as my father, the Navy man, would have said. So, you know that old joke. Just tell God your plans and see what happens. Somebody told me that joke recently. So, this passage sometimes is preached from the perspective of the people working out of pride. And it is, in a way. It's pride. But it's pride based on insecurity. And it's the worst kind of pride. That kind of pride is hollow pride. When people do things to protect themselves because they feel insecure, that's the worst kind of pride. To build themselves up, to puff themselves out, because inside they feel like nothing. You know people like that, right? That's the worst. Don't you know people like that? Of course you do, and that's the worst. I mean, you know, somebody who's really got it all together, that's no big deal. That you can talk to people like that, you can work with people like that. But people who want to control everything because deep inside they don't have a lot going for them, they are the most difficult people to deal with on the planet. Yeah? Okay. So God and the divine council, they look down and they say, well, that may be your plan, but that's not our plan for you. They probably could have gone on forever just building and, you know, creating and stuff. That would have been fine. But no, don't get all puffed up about it. You get puffed up, and then God has to unpuff you. That's going to be a problem. So, huddled in fear and looking for comfort are those, they're just like themselves, and they speak like each other, and the divine council says, well, you know what, let's create some diversity down there, and let's see what they do with that. Let's just see then what they can do. So the people, their worst fear happens. And isn't that just what happens sometimes? When you're, you know, we even say that to each other, you know, when we say our worst fear out loud, and somebody will say, shh, 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 don't do that. Because sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The people get scattered and divided, and they couldn't understand one another anymore. And unfortunately, misunderstanding erupted. They began to look different, people did, and have different customs. And what they still should have shared was the God who created them. They still should have known that they were still the same. They should have known that, always. We still should know that, always. But we forget that no matter what, whether we speak differently or look differently, we are still the same, no matter what. But we forget. We forget that we are still the children of the same God. Well, in due time, God came to earth in human form and walked among us briefly and reminded us that we are all one together, Jews and Samaritans and Galileans and even Romans. All people are God's people. All people are God's people. All. Even now, all people are God's people. We don't like to admit that, but it is true. That has not changed. From the days of the flood onward, we do like to keep dividing people out. But after his death and resurrection, Christ's disciples were still afraid. And just like those primitive folks that followed the flood, they huddled together. And there they were, all of them alike, all of them from one place, all of them speaking the same language, all of them with the same customs, huddled in one little room, afraid. We don't change much, do we? They were all from Israel. But here's what was new about them. They had finally come to understand who their teacher was. Now, we read those Gospels and we just think, how thick are you, disciples? They never get it, you know? We read those disciples and they never get it, they never get it, they never get it. And then all of a sudden, the crucifixion and the resurrection, and they finally understand who their master was. After all the teaching and the preaching and the healing they had witnessed, after all the questions they had asked and he had answered, after everything they had misunderstood, they finally understood that they had been in the presence of the living God in human form. And they also understood that he had called them to continue his work, to tell the world about him. They had to get out of that little room. They couldn't stay there huddled like those early folks had wanted to do. They were huddled in fear. The disciples were huddled in fear. Do we sometimes huddle in fear? It's easy to do. So in that upper room, they took up the call. They prepared to talk to a group of believers who had gathered from all over the world there in Jerusalem. Jerusalem, oddly enough, was kind of a center. They weren't just pilgrims. Sometimes your translations calls it a pilgrim. But they were actually immigrants. They were foreigners, aliens living in Jerusalem. And they came from all over. I don't know if any of the maps have gone by yet. Have they? Yeah. Some of the maps that would have been up there showing all of the lines that came up from all over, they did come from all over the civilized world at the time. And that was the most civilized world. If you had expanded the maps up there, Europe was primitive. Oh my gosh, compared to that portion of the world. You know, you wouldn't have wanted our ancestors if we're from Northern Europe. You know, terrible compared to the Mediterranean world at that time. They would have been from everywhere and speaking different languages. So here they have the task to tell about this person they now know is the living God, and they have to communicate. So now, what happens? The Holy Spirit comes, and instead of having them speak different languages, now the Holy Spirit comes and gives them the power, just goes back the opposite direction, and gives them the power, well, or maybe not, but gives them the power to speak these different languages and be understood by all of these different people for the first time. The message was that the Lord was God, and that our place as disciples was to love God and love one another, and to take this message in word and in deed to one another, to the world. We are to dream dreams and see visions and be disciples for God, for the kingdom of God. At Babel, we were scattered. Was it possible that their dream of a city of comfort and safety was removed from them because they were meant to go out into the world and create God's kingdom? I like to think that while they still had the covenant and the saving fresh on their minds, they should have. They should have. Do we keep trying to create little places of comfort and safety in our world, in our churches? And can we expect God to honor that? Or does God want us to venture out and take the kingdom of love to our neighborhoods and our schools and our workplaces? And if we keep feeling like God snatches safety and comfort away from us all the time, is that maybe because we're not supposed to be comfortable and safe? Maybe we're supposed to be out there uncomfortable, out of our comfort zone. And maybe we shouldn't be surprised if we get on this one. And it gets snatched away. Maybe it's going to happen over and over and over. And we just should expect it. So, what is our dream? If we just take that as a maybe, if we take that as a maybe we should think, maybe we should start making ourselves a little uncomfortable, not wait for God to pull the rug out from under us. Maybe we should make ourselves uncomfortable and dream a dream, see a vision as what God might want us to do.